The black SUV screeched to a stop in front of the restaurant. Every conversation inside died instantly. A fork slipped from a customer's hand and clattered against a plate. The hostess froze. Even the kitchen staff peered through the service window. "He's here," the manager whispered. The restaurant's owner, who rarely looked nervous, suddenly wiped sweat from his forehead. Nobody makes eye contact. Nobody says anything, unless he speaks first. 3 waitresses exchanged uneasy glances. Then Brittany smirked. "I have a better idea." She turned toward the largest waitress in the dining room. Caterina. Caterina Bianchi looked up from arranging silverware. She was 28 years old, proudly Italian, and impossible to ignore. Her full cheeks carried a warm smile that somehow survived the cruelty she faced every day. Her soft, curvy figure filled out her uniform in a way that drew constant whispers from strangers and endless mockery from her coworkers. She had spent her entire life hearing words like too big, too heavy, and too much. Yet somehow, she still treated every customer with genuine kindness. "What is it?" she asked. Brittany forced a sweet smile. "The VIP table is yours." The smile on Caterina's face disappeared. "The VIP? Yes." Vanessa folded her arms. "You should feel honored." Chloe covered her mouth to hide her laughter. "Unless you're scared." Before Caterina could answer, the manager walked over. "Caterina."
"Yes, sir?"
"Table 1 is yours tonight." Her stomach tightened. I thought Brittany usually handles VIP guests. "Not tonight. But, no arguments." He leaned closer. "And whatever happens, don't embarrass this restaurant." The 3 women exchanged victorious glances. As Caterina walked toward the entrance to greet the guest, Brittany quietly pulled out her phone. "Oh, this is going to be good." Vanessa grinned. "I hope she spills wine all over him," Chloe whispered. "Or better yet, maybe he throws her out himself." The 3 of them started recording. Outside, 2 enormous bodyguards stepped out first. Both men scanned the street before opening the rear door. A tall man emerged, over 6'3", broad shoulders, black tailored suit, dark beard trimmed with military precision. His neck disappeared beneath layers of intricate tattoos that stretched beneath his collar. Black ink crept over his hands and fingers like living artwork. Rumors said the tattoos covered nearly every inch of his body. His name was Marco Romano. In Italy, people whispered his name instead of saying it aloud. Some called him a businessman. Others called him something much darker. Nobody could prove either. One thing everyone agreed on: you never crossed Marco Romano. He walked toward the entrance without looking at anyone. The manager practically ran to greet him. "Mr. Romano, welcome back." Marco simply nodded. He never spoke. One bodyguard signed something with his hands. The manager nodded nervously. Of course. He turned. Caterina. She hurried over. "Mr. Romano prefers to communicate through sign language." Her eyes widened. "He's deaf?" The manager shot her a warning look. "That information never leaves this building." "I understand. You'll serve him." Her pulse raced. I don't know sign language. Figure it out." He walked away. Caterina stood frozen. She had less than a minute. Her hands trembled as she reached into her apron and pulled out her phone. She quickly searched. Basic Italian sign language greetings. Her eyes darted across the screen. "Hello, good evening, thank you, welcome." She repeated the movements to herself. "Come on, don't mess this up." The bodyguard noticed. Marco noticed too. Neither interrupted her. Finally, she approached the table. Taking a slow breath, she smiled. Instead of speaking, she carefully signed. "Good evening." Her movements were clumsy, far from perfect, but unmistakably sincere. Marco stopped moving. His dark eyes met hers. For several long seconds, neither of them looked away. One bodyguard raised an eyebrow. The other looked genuinely surprised. Marco slowly lifted one hand. His fingers moved gracefully. The signs were too fast. Caterina blinked. I'm sorry. She laughed nervously. I only learned 4 signs about 30 seconds ago. She pointed to her phone. I didn't want you to feel left out. One bodyguard translated. Mr. Romano says, nobody has ever done that before. Caterina looked confused. Nobody. The translator shook his head. They either avoid him or only speak to me. Her expression softened. That sounds lonely. The translator hesitated before signing. Marco's eyes remained on Caterina. Then, something happened that nobody inside the restaurant had ever seen. Marco smiled. Not a polite smile. A real one. Across the dining room, Brittany almost dropped her phone. What? Vanessa stared. No way. Chloe whispered. I've worked here 3 years. I've never seen him smile. The manager looked horrified. What did she do? Back at the table, Caterina relaxed slightly. I'm Caterina. She pointed to herself. Caterina. The translator signed. Marco touched his chest. Marco, she smiled. It's nice to meet you, Marco. Again, his lips curved upward. The atmosphere around the table completely changed. Instead of fear, there was peace. Caterina handed him the menu. I'll be honest. She chuckled softly. I barely know any signs. The translator interpreted. So if I make mistakes, she shrugged. You have permission to laugh. Marco actually let out a silent laugh, his shoulders shaking slightly. The bodyguards looked at each other. Neither had seen him this relaxed in years. One quietly murmured, "This is unbelievable." While Marco looked over the menu, Caterina waited patiently. She didn't rush him. She didn't look uncomfortable. She simply stood nearby with the same respect she gave every customer. Finally, Marco pointed to a dish. The translator spoke. He'll have the filet with vegetables. Excellent choice. She wrote the order down. And something to drink? Marco signed again. The translator smiled. He says, surprise him. Caterina laughed. That's dangerous. She looked toward the bar. I think I know exactly what he'll like. As she walked away, Brittany intercepted her. What happened? What do you mean? Why is he smiling? I don't know. You don't know. Caterina frowned. We just talked. You talked. He communicates differently. So, I treated him like everyone else. Vanessa scoffed. Don't act innocent. I'm not. Chloe folded her arms. You're trying to impress him. Caterina stared at them. I'm trying to do my job. Brittany leaned closer. You think because he smiled at you you're special? No. Then stay away from him. Caterina sighed. I don't even know the man. You will. What is that supposed to mean? Brittany smiled coldly. You'll find out. Before Caterina could answer, the bartender handed her a sparkling Italian citrus drink. She carried it back to Marco. I hope you like this. The translator signed. Marco took one sip, then another. He nodded approvingly. He says it's perfect. Caterina smiled. I'm glad. A little girl sitting 2 tables away suddenly wandered toward Marco's table after dropping her stuffed rabbit. Her frightened mother gasped. Sophia, come back. The entire restaurant held its breath. One bodyguard stepped forward instinctively. Marco gently raised his hand, stopping him. The little girl picked up her rabbit, looked up at the tattooed man, and smiled. Without hesitation, Marco bent down, picked up the toy, dusted it off, and handed it back with a warm smile. Caterina witnessed everything. So did the entire restaurant. Every rumor she'd heard about the feared Italian Mafia boss suddenly collided with what she had just seen, and from across the room, Brittany slowly lowered her phone. For the first time that night, doubt crept across her face. What if, she whispered, this prank just became the biggest mistake we've ever made? Marco watched Caterina walk back toward the kitchen, but his eyes lingered longer than anyone expected. Not because of her appearance, not because she had stumbled through a few awkward signs, because she had done something no one else had bothered to do. She had tried. Inside the kitchen, the moment the swinging door closed behind her, Brittany grabbed her arm. "What did you say to him?" "I served him." "Don't play dumb." "I wasn't." Vanessa folded her arms. He smiled twice. "I noticed. People like him don't smile." Caterina gently pulled her arm free. Maybe people never gave him a reason. The room went silent. Then Brittany laughed loudly. "Listen to her, Saint Caterina. You think kindness fixes everything?" Caterina looked directly at her. "No, but it costs nothing." Before anyone could answer, the manager stormed into the kitchen. "Caterina."
"Yes, sir?"
"Table 1 wants you." Her heart skipped. Did I do something wrong?" "I don't know." "He specifically asked for you." The other waitresses stared in disbelief. "Specifically?" Chloe whispered. "You're kidding." The manager looked annoyed. "I'm not kidding." He lowered his voice. "And don't get any ideas. You're still just a waitress." Caterina nodded and returned to the dining room. Marco was waiting. As she approached, he held up his phone. On the screen was a translation app. It read, "Thank you for trying to speak my language." Caterina smiled warmly. She typed back, "Everyone deserves to be understood." Marco read the sentence twice. Then he looked up at her. His expression softened again. He typed another message. "Most people just talk louder when they realize I'm deaf." She couldn't help laughing. "They actually do that?" He nodded. She shook her head. "That's ridiculous." The translator wasn't needed anymore. They simply passed the phone back and forth. "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 4 years." "Do they treat you well?" She hesitated. Then she forced a smile. "They pay me." Marco noticed she hadn't answered the question. Before he could type again, Brittany walked over. Her smile was fake. "Everything okay here?" Marco didn't even look at her. Instead, he handed his phone back to Caterina. Brittany's smile disappeared. "I was talking to both of you." Still nothing. Caterina politely said, "We're fine." Brittany walked away with her jaw clenched. "Did you see that?" she hissed to Chloe. "He ignored me." Chloe crossed her arms. "He ignored all of us." Vanessa stared at Caterina. "This is getting out of hand." Back at the table, Marco finished his meal. Caterina brought the dessert menu. "I know this isn't part of my job." She smiled sheepishly. "But if you trust me again, I'd like to surprise you." Marco tilted his head. She laughed. "I promise, it's dessert this time." He nodded. "One surprise coming up." She hurried into the kitchen. The pastry chef looked confused. "You need what?" "The tiramisu." "That's our last slice." "I know. It's reserved. I'll replace it." "For who?" She glanced toward the dining room. "Table 1. The chef's eyes widened. "Oh." 5 minutes later, Caterina carefully placed the dessert before Marco. He took one bite, then another. Finally, he looked up and gave her a firm thumbs up. She laughed. "I'll take that as approval." Across the room, customers had started noticing something unusual. Instead of the intimidating atmosphere that usually surrounded Marco Romano, there was quiet conversation, smiles, even laughter. A businessman whispered to his wife, "Is that really him? I thought he was terrifying." "So did I." Near closing time, Marco stood. The manager rushed over. "Mr. Romano, thank you for dining with us." Marco barely acknowledged him. Instead, he walked directly to Caterina. Everyone watched. Every customer, every employee, even the chefs, peeked through the kitchen window. Marco reached into his jacket. The room tensed. One customer instinctively ducked. Instead of a weapon, he removed a simple black business card. He handed it to Caterina. She looked confused. The translator smiled. "He says, keep learning." She looked down. On the card was the address of a sign language academy. Tucked inside was a handwritten note. "The first year is already paid for." Her eyes widened. "No." She looked up. I can't accept this. Marco simply shook his head. She tried handing it back. I barely know you. The translator smiled again. He says, kindness deserves investment. Caterina felt tears gathering. But why me? Marco signed a much longer sentence. The translator looked emotional himself. He says, because today, for the first time in many years, someone saw the man before the disability. Silence filled the restaurant. Even Brittany stopped recording. Caterina swallowed hard. Thank you. She carefully signed the words herself. They weren't perfect, but Marco understood. He nodded respectfully before leaving. The black SUV disappeared into the night. Only after it was gone did the restaurant erupt. What was on that card? Did he give you money? Were you flirting? The questions came from every direction. Caterina shook her head. It wasn't like that. Brittany snatched the card from her hand. A school? She frowned. Sign language classes? Vanessa looked over her shoulder. He paid for them? Give it back, Caterina said calmly. Brittany held it higher. So now he's buying you gifts. It's not a gift. What is it then? It's encouragement. Chloe laughed. She's already defending him. Caterina finally took the card back. He wanted me to learn. For what? I don't know. The manager interrupted. Everyone stopped standing around. He looked at Caterina. My office. She followed him. The door closed. He folded his hands. What exactly happened tonight? I served dinner. Don't test my patience. I'm not. Why did Mr. Romano spend nearly 2 hours talking to you? He asked questions. What kind of questions? About work. And nothing. The manager leaned forward. You need to understand something. He isn't an ordinary customer. I know. If anything happens because of you, this restaurant could lose everything. Caterina frowned. I didn't do anything wrong.
You got his attention.
I wasn't trying to.
But you did.
He sighed heavily. Stay professional. I always do. Good. She left the office feeling uneasy. Outside, Brittany was waiting. So, what? Did you get promoted already? No. Maybe he's hiring you. Caterina smiled tiredly. I just want to go home. She stepped outside into the cool evening air. The streets were quiet. She started walking toward the bus stop, exhausted. Halfway there, headlights slowed beside her. The same black SUV. Her heart raced. One of the bodyguards stepped out. Miss Bianchi. She instinctively stepped back. Yes? He held out a neatly folded umbrella. You left this at the restaurant. She blinked. I did. Mr. Romano noticed. She accepted it. Thank you. The bodyguard smiled politely. One more thing. He asked me to tell you. Caterina waited. Don't let cruel people convince you that kindness is weakness. She froze. How did he know? The bodyguard looked toward the restaurant in the distance. He notices much more than people realize. The SUV drove away. Caterina stood motionless on the sidewalk, clutching the umbrella and the business card. She had no idea that, from across the street, Brittany had witnessed the entire exchange from inside her own car. Her face twisted with jealousy. So that's how it's going to be, she muttered. She immediately grabbed her phone and called Chloe. We have a problem. What now? He followed her. What? The SUV stopped for Caterina. There was silence. Then Chloe asked quietly, what if she tells him about us? Brittany's expression hardened. Then we make sure she never gets the chance. If you're already wondering how far Brittany and the others are willing to go to destroy Caterina's life, you're not ready for what happens next. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, and share it with someone who loves dramatic stories, because the next chapter. The following Monday, Caterina walked into the restaurant with the same warm smile she always wore. But the atmosphere felt different. Conversations stopped as she passed. People stared. Even the dishwasher, old Giuseppe, noticed. He quietly asked, "What happened over the weekend?" She sighed. "I wish I knew." Before Giuseppe could answer, Brittany clapped her hands loudly. "Everybody, look who's here." Several employees turned. The Mafia's favorite waitress. A few laughed. Others looked uncomfortable. Caterina kept walking. "I'm here to work." "Oh, you'll work," Brittany replied. "Just don't expect special treatment." Caterina calmly tied her apron. "I never have." The manager stepped onto the floor. "Listen up." Everyone gathered. "We have a full reservation list tonight." He looked directly at Caterina. "You'll be handling sections 7 through 12. Her eyes widened. "That's almost half the restaurant. You can manage." Brittany normally covers section 9. "Not tonight. Vanessa has 10. They don't anymore." The other waitresses smirked. They knew exactly what was happening. The manager was setting Caterina up to fail. Giuseppe quietly muttered as he passed behind her with a tray of dishes. "They're trying to break you." She smiled faintly. "Not today." The dinner rush arrived all at once. Customers filled every table. "Caterina, can we get more bread?" "Excuse me, miss." She hurried from one table to another without complaining. A little boy accidentally spilled orange juice across the floor. His mother gasped. "I'm so sorry." Caterina knelt immediately. "It's okay." The boy looked frightened. "I didn't mean to." She smiled. "Neither did gravity." The little boy laughed. His mother smiled too. "Thank you for not yelling. I was a child once." Across the room, Brittany rolled her eyes. "Always performing," Vanessa whispered. "People actually like her. That's exactly the problem." Just then, the restaurant doors opened. Every employee looked up. Marco Romano had returned. This time, he wasn't alone. 4 tattooed men followed behind him. Each looked as intimidating as the last. The restaurant instantly fell silent. The manager hurried forward. "Mr. Romano, welcome back." Marco glanced around the dining room. His eyes stopped on Caterina. He signed one short sentence. The translator smiled. He would like the same table and the same waitress. Brittany's smile vanished. The manager forced one of his own. "Of course." He walked to Caterina. "Drop everything. What about my other tables?" "I'll figure it out." "But they're eating." I said go. She nodded. "I'm sorry." She told the nearest family. "I'll be right back." The father smiled. "Take your time. We'll wait." Caterina approached Marco's table. She smiled and signed carefully. "Welcome back." Her movements were already smoother than before. Marco's eyes brightened. He signed something longer. She understood only part of it. "I'm still learning." The translator chuckled. He said, "Your signing is already much better." She laughed. "I've been practicing every night." Marco nodded approvingly. "I can tell." She froze, then laughed again. "You spoke." His voice was deep and rough from years of rarely using it. Only 2 words, but enough to surprise everyone nearby. The translator smiled. "He can speak." "I know. He simply prefers signing." Caterina nodded. "I understand." For the first time, Marco continued speaking without the translator. "Practice." The words came slowly, deliberately. She smiled. "I will." He nodded once. "So will I." She realized what he meant. He was practicing speaking just as she was practicing signing. They were meeting each other halfway. Across the room, customers noticed. One whispered, "That's beautiful." Another quietly applauded. Brittany clenched her fists. "This can't keep happening." Vanessa whispered, "People are watching." "I know. This is making us look bad." Brittany suddenly smiled. "I have an idea." An hour later, Caterina was carrying a tray with Marco's main course. As she passed the service station, Brittany casually stepped backward, straight into her path. The tray lurched. A glass shattered. Wine splashed across the floor. The entire restaurant gasped. Caterina barely managed to keep the food from falling onto Marco. "I'm so sorry." She immediately looked at Marco. It was an accident. Before she could explain further, Brittany raised her voice. "She almost poured wine on Mr. Romano. Several customers turned. The manager came running. What happened?" Brittany answered before Caterina could. She wasn't paying attention. Caterina stared at her. "That's not true. You tripped. You stepped in front of me." "I did no such thing." Vanessa nodded dramatically. "I saw the whole thing." "So did I," Chloe added. 3 voices against 1. The manager looked furious. "Caterina, it wasn't my fault. Enough." Marco quietly watched everything. He didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He simply observed. The bodyguards exchanged knowing looks. One discreetly glanced toward the security cameras mounted in each corner of the dining room. He smiled slightly. The manager sighed. "Clean this up." "I'm sorry," Caterina whispered. Marco gently raised one hand. She stopped talking. He signed slowly. She understood every word. "Not your fault." Her eyes widened. You saw?" He nodded once. The translator didn't need to speak. Caterina felt tears threatening to escape. "Thank you." Marco simply gave a reassuring nod. Brittany saw the exchange. Panic flickered across her face. Did he believe her? Vanessa looked nervous. "I don't know." "Forget it," Brittany whispered. "We need something bigger." The rest of the evening passed, but the tension only grew. As customers left, something unexpected happened. The family whose little boy had spilled the juice earlier approached the manager. The father smiled. "We'd like to leave a compliment." The manager forced a polite smile. "For whom?" "Caterina. She was incredible." The mother nodded. "Our son has autism. He usually struggles in restaurants, but she treated him with so much patience." The little boy hugged Caterina tightly. "You're my favorite waitress." Several nearby customers smiled. Another elderly couple spoke up. "We'd also like to compliment her." Then another, and another. Within minutes, 5 different tables had praised Caterina. The manager's forced smile became thinner each time. After everyone left, he walked into his office. Brittany, Vanessa, and Chloe followed. He closed the door. "This has to stop." Brittany nodded eagerly. "We agree. If Romano keeps requesting her, she'll become the face of this restaurant." Chloe frowned. And people like her don't fit our image." Vanessa smirked. "I've got an idea." The manager looked interested. "What?" She leaned closer. "We don't destroy her reputation." A slow smile spread across Brittany's face as she understood. "We destroy her honesty." The manager folded his arms. "Explain." Vanessa lowered her voice. "What if money disappears, and everyone believes Caterina took it?" Silence. Then the manager slowly smiled. "I think that could work." Outside the office, Giuseppe had been carrying a crate of vegetables toward the kitchen. He hadn't meant to overhear them, but he heard enough. His face turned pale. "They're planning something terrible." He looked toward Caterina, who was happily wiping down tables, completely unaware. He wanted to warn her immediately. He took one step, then another. Before he could reach her, his phone rang. It was the hospital. His wife had collapsed. Without another thought, Giuseppe rushed out of the restaurant. Caterina watched him leave. "Giuseppe?" He didn't hear her. She frowned. Something didn't feel right. She had no way of knowing that the only person who had overheard the conspiracy was now racing toward the hospital, while the people plotting against her smiled, believing that by tomorrow night, her entire life would be in ruins. If you think this story has been emotional so far, the biggest betrayal is still ahead. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with your friends, because the final chapter delivers the justice no one sees coming. The next evening, Caterina arrived early. She always did. She believed that if she worked harder than everyone else, eventually people would judge her by her heart instead of her appearance. She had no idea that someone had already decided her fate. Brittany stood behind the front desk with Vanessa and Chloe. Everything was ready.
Remember, Brittany whispered, once the cash disappears, nobody asks questions. Vanessa nodded. And Caterina's locker? I already slipped the envelope inside. Chloe smiled nervously. This is going to end her career. None of them noticed the newest security camera hanging above the hallway.
It had been installed just 2 days earlier after several expensive bottles of wine had disappeared. No one had bothered to tell the staff. The dinner rush began. Marco arrived later than usual. This time he came alone. Even without bodyguards surrounding him, the room instantly fell silent. His tailored black suit covered the colorful tattoos stretching across his neck and hands. But nothing could hide the powerful presence that followed him everywhere. He looked around. His eyes immediately found Caterina. She smiled and signed confidently.
Good evening, Marco.
He answered with a smile. Good evening, Caterina. His voice was still slow but stronger than before. She laughed happily. You're getting better. He pointed toward her hands. So are you. For a moment, the rest of the restaurant disappeared. 2 people meeting each other halfway. No judgment, no fear, only respect. The manager interrupted. Caterina. She turned. My office. She looked confused. Now, Marco watched quietly. Caterina entered the office. The manager stood with folded arms. On his desk sat a thick envelope filled with cash. His expression was cold. Would you like to explain this? She frowned. I've never seen that. It was found in your locker. My locker. Yes, that's impossible. Brittany stepped inside dramatically. I told you she'd deny it. Vanessa nodded. I saw her near the office earlier. You liar! Caterina whispered. I wasn't even here. The manager slammed his hand on the desk. Enough, Caterina Bianchi. You're fired. The words hit her like a train. What? Effective immediately. No, I didn't steal anything. The evidence says otherwise. She felt tears filling her eyes. Please. I've worked here for 4 years. I've never stolen so much as a spoon. The manager pointed toward the door. Leave your apron. Please listen. I said leave. Outside, several customers looked toward the office. After hearing raised voices, Marco slowly stood. The translator wasn't there. He walked toward the office himself. The manager opened the door. Mr. Romano. Marco looked at Caterina's tear-filled eyes, then at the envelope, then at Brittany. Without saying a word, he pulled out his phone and typed a single sentence. He turned the screen toward the manager. Show me the security footage. The manager hesitated. That won't be necessary. Marco looked at him without blinking. Again he typed, now. The room became painfully quiet. The manager swallowed. The cameras don't cover everything. Marco looked toward the hallway, then pointed upward. Everyone followed his finger. The new security camera. Brittany's face instantly turned white. Vanessa whispered, no. Marco typed another message. Play it. Within minutes, everyone gathered around the office monitor. The recording began. There was Caterina arriving for work. There was Caterina serving customers. There was Caterina nowhere near the office. Then, Brittany appeared. She looked around carefully. She removed the envelope from her purse. She opened Caterina's locker. She placed the money inside. Vanessa stood watch. Chloe nodded toward the hallway. The entire room fell silent. The recording continued. It clearly showed Brittany walking into the manager's office moments later, then pretending to discover the money. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The manager slowly sat down. His face had lost all color. Marco looked at Caterina, then back at the screen. Finally he spoke. His voice was quiet, but every word landed like thunder. Truth. One word. That was all. Caterina broke into tears. I told you. I told all of you. The manager couldn't even meet her eyes. Brittany's knees nearly gave out. It wasn't. She stopped. There was nothing left to say. The video had said everything. Just then, 2 police officers entered the restaurant. The manager looked confused. Officers? Marco had already texted them while the footage was loading. One officer looked at the screen, then at Brittany. We'll need all 3 of you to come with us. Vanessa started crying. Please. It was Brittany's idea. Chloe immediately pointed at Vanessa. She planned it. You agreed. You did too. Within seconds, they were blaming one another. Marco simply watched. Caterina wiped away her tears. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She only looked exhausted. The officers escorted the 3 women outside. Customers quietly applauded, not because anyone had been arrested, but because the truth had finally won. The manager slowly stood. Caterina, I'm sorry. She looked at him. You believed them. I made a mistake. No. She shook her head. You made a choice. He lowered his head. I did. Marco typed another message and handed the phone to the manager. The manager's eyes widened. You own this restaurant? Every employee froze. The manager looked as though he couldn't breathe. Marco nodded once. Several months earlier, he had quietly purchased the business through one of his investment companies. No one had known. He had spent weeks observing how people treated one another, especially those they believed had no power. He looked at the manager, then spoke again, finished. The manager understood immediately. You mean? Marco nodded. The manager removed his own name tag and placed it on the desk. I deserve that. He quietly walked out of the restaurant. Marco turned toward Caterina. She looked completely overwhelmed. I don't know what's happening. He smiled gently, then typed. Would you accept a new position? She frowned. What position? He turned the phone around. General manager. She stared at the screen, then laughed through her tears. You're joking. He shook his head. I've never managed anything. He typed again. You managed kindness. The rest can be taught. She covered her mouth. I don't have the experience. He continued typing. Experience creates skills. Character creates leaders. Old Giuseppe suddenly walked through the front door. He looked healthier than the night before. My wife is stable. Then he saw Caterina crying. What happened? Several employees pointed toward the monitor. He watched the footage. His shoulders dropped. I tried to warn you. You knew? I overheard them. The hospital called before I could. She hugged him tightly. I'm just glad your wife is okay. Marco quietly watched the exchange, then typed one final offer. Triple your salary. Full medical insurance for your mother. Leadership training. Complete freedom to rebuild this restaurant your way. She looked at him with tears streaming down her cheeks. Why would you trust me with all this? Marco looked directly into her eyes before answering in his own voice. Slowly, clearly, when he paused, everyone, another pause, thought I was dangerous. He smiled. You treated me like a human. He looked around the dining room. Everyone deserves that. Caterina nodded, unable to speak. 6 months later, the restaurant had become one of the most welcoming in the city. Every employee learned Italian Sign Language. Customers with disabilities no longer worried about being ignored. Families returned week after week. Business nearly doubled. On the wall near the entrance hung a simple sentence chosen by Caterina. Kindness is never wasted. Visitors often asked why the restaurant felt so different. The staff always gave the same answer. Because everyone is seen here. One busy evening, the little boy who had spilled orange juice months earlier ran inside again. He hugged Caterina. My favorite manager. She laughed. I've missed you. Marco watched from his usual table, not as a feared customer, not as an intimidating businessman, simply as a man enjoying dinner. Caterina walked over and signed with complete confidence. "Thank you." Marco smiled. "For what?" She signed back. "For believing in me before I believed in myself." He answered with one final sentence. "The world judged your size. I judged your heart." Their smiles said everything words never could. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the loudest. Sometimes the kindest people are the ones the world overlooks. And sometimes the greatest act of strength is choosing compassion when everyone else chooses cruelty. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes kindness can change lives. And tell us in the comments, if you had been in Caterina's place, would you have treated Marco any differently before knowing who he really was? Your answer might inspire someone else. Until the next story, remember this: people may judge appearances in a second, but character is revealed over a lifetime.